some people stepped back, and other people stepped forward and took a hold of people, right? They took control. It was a little too chaotic. We got to figure out how we're going to control the situation and get the job done, right? So how many times does that happen to us in our lives, right? We start to feel like things are a little out of control, a little chaotic. So our reaction is, all right, we gotta get a little more control going on here so we can get things back into equilibrium. But what happens when we begin to feel controlled? First of all, who likes to be controlled? Right. Who likes to control things sometimes? Okay, yeah, let's be honest about it. Okay, sure, thank you. But what happens when we start to feel like we're being overly controlled? We push back. Sometimes we really start to feel a sense of apathy and despair. We're not inspired anymore. We're certainly not learning anything because it's really just all about doing what we're told at that point, right? So over here, if it's too much control, it's really just not very helpful. There's no learning, there's no creativity. Now, sometimes there's a real need to have some order and control, right? Sometimes it's really important for our safety, for our well-being. But when we're thinking about this from a problem-solving standpoint, finding a balance between order and control is good when we have technical problems. When we already know the solution, and it's really just about replicating what we already know works. We don't need any extra creativity in the process. We know how it works. And so this is often what we refer to as management. Right? We just want to maintain the status quo, and we want to make sure it's done well. Now, sometimes that's good, right? With evidence-based practices of restorative justice, for example, we know some things that really work well with that. And in that case, we want to make sure we're really replicating and doing that well because we know what works. Now, when we start thinking about, though, the possibilities that we put in the center this morning, are those things that we already have the solution for? Do we know how we're going to get to those possibilities? It's kind of like what we experienced outside, isn't it? Right? We're pretty clear about the possibility, got a sense of what it's going to take to get there. Things keep shifting. So that's where we want to start to look at this balance between chaos and order. So when we have complex problems, and we really don't know the solution or how we're going to get there, it's about bringing in all the voices that we talked about this morning. So these complex problems aren't something that any one person or even a small group of the smartest people can solve. The only way we're really going to understand that problem is by bringing in a diverse group that really can understand that system, that problem, from very different perspectives. So it's about engaging in a deep way. And so this is where the art of hosting comes in, or what we sometimes refer to as participatory leadership. Because it's about not just having a leader that has all the answers, that's going to show us the way. It's about how do we come together and all be in our leadership, together figuring out how do we go from here. So bringing in those voices, being in the learning together about what's working and what's not, so that we can get to creative innovations and solutions. So what happens between chaos and order is this place of what we refer to as emergence. It's really the place of creativity and innovation. This is the place where something new can take form. In the natural world, something new always comes at the edges, as we spoke to this morning. And so how do we balance just enough order with just enough chaos, but a creative kind of chaos that allows that new emergence to come forward. So when we think about chaos, we want to be clear about the distinction between chaos, which actually can bring creativity and new order, from chemos, which is really more of a destructive form of chaos that can lead to rebellion and a destructive kind of order. So if our goal is to be able to find balance between chaos, the creative kind of chaos, and order so that something new might emerge, this is where we again come back to the art of hosting. And so the art of hosting is really about creating the conditions and the processes and having the tools where we can come together and engage in conversation with one another so that we can figure out how's the most wise way to proceed. Now that's not always an easy place to be. The more voices you bring in, at first it can be confusing. It can bring conflict. But if we're willing to stay in it long enough together, that's where we can get to clarity. And we'll be teaching another map later in the week about that. So as leaders, as art of hosting leaders, what we're trying to do then is figure out in any situation, what's the right balance? Is the situation that we're in right now, do we need a little bit more order, a little more structure to what we're trying to do? Or do we need a little more creativity, a little more flexibility, a little bit more openness? Because as soon as we start to define or get too tight around what we're trying to do, we shut down possibilities. So do we need to open it up, or do we need to add a little more structure, a little more order here in order to be able to get to where we want to go? So we call this, when we're able to make that balance, we call it chaotic confidence. So as leaders, do we have the chaotic confidence to be with the ambiguity of the unknown and hold what's at the center so that we can truly get to something new? Now, as far as Stone Soup is concerned then, while some of our restorative justice practices, we may have, we know what works to some degree, but in terms of Stone Soup and our process of coming together as a community, in our communities, to create restorative community, that's a complex issue. So we need to be able and willing to balance this ambiguity. And so with that, Kelly, I'd like to invite you to add on to this.
That's beautiful. Something that I was thinking when you were saying that is just that place where the chaos and order come together, right? One of the questions or the practices how I use this mental model is just thinking, what's the lightest structure that can hold the chaos that we're inviting in? So what, in this sense, the way that Chris talked about chaos is you're inviting in different voices. I mean, what could that be? What are some of the, when you're hearing chaos in this model, what are some of the ways you're thinking about it? Bringing youth and adults together, bringing people from the criminal justice system and restorative justice folks who haven't met before into the room together. What are some other things that you might call inviting chaos into the
Police and teens in the same room.
Pardon?
Police and teens in the same room. Law enforcement and teenagers.
Law enforcement and teenagers. Right.
People who are advocates of different practices.
Different ways of practicing. What might also feel chaotic to you? What do you think, that's your edge? Like, ooh, that would be chaotic.
That's a meeting I'll hire someone else to run.
There you go. That's right. Good idea, but how could we possibly do it?
Administrators and field staff, or administrators and teachers.
So that's when you know that's when you just want a little bit of order. You want a little bit of structure, really. How can we hold that? What do we need? What would allow us to bring that into the room? Because there's an aching for it, right? there's a sense that there's something new can come out of that. So, I think that a lot of us come to this art of hosting practice because we know that the ways we've been meeting, the structures we've been using are safe and we get the same thing. So this is a model that helps us step into that. You know, we talked this morning about challenges, kind of step into that edge where, whoa, this is exciting, but perhaps a little bit chaotic. So,
Yeah. So just to build one thing last in about Stone Soup, why we're really here. You know, all along we've been talking about how do we build on our collective strengths to create restorative community. And we've always talked about wanting it to be sustainable. For me, this model offers a different way of thinking about what do we mean by sustainability. In the past, in the work that I did in schools around social emotional learning, sustainability meant pick a program and hold that program there for now into infinity, right? Same old thing, just keep doing it. Forget the fact that kids change, schools change, needs change, right? So how does this help us think about the idea that sustainability really is about adaptability? So how do we hold on to what's most important, which is restorative justice, restorative communities, but how do we be flexible over time and adapt to the changing needs, changing circumstances, changing resources, so that we're constantly balancing some order with what's new so that we can continue restorative justice, not just a program. And how do we continue to be in it together? Because that's what it's all about. Because if we can't be in it together, we're not going to solve this complex issue.
That flexibility that you talked about, I think is so important because I think that's why we're having troubles right now because the judicial system is operating just like it did in 1905. whenever the first statutes were printed. So that they have the flexibility, somebody talked about flexibility. And maybe we could, that there's a man who left his home for a short time, his wife was in Iraq, he left his home for a short time, left 2 children there alone, and he came back and the place was on fire. Now he's going to be sentenced, and the traditional way to sentence him would be the penitentiary. But with Stone Soup, I mean, imagine we could help, he could help other children, and he could honor the children he lost. But that's going to take flexibility. So how do we get the flexibility?
Yes, it's a question. So I just want to invite you to take just 2 minutes to turn to someone next to you and just take a second to think about how does this map begin to inform how we might start to move towards those possibilities. How does this idea of balancing order and chaos so that something new can emerge, those possibilities that we've been talking about, how does this map begin to inform how we think about moving forward? I'm just going to take a couple minutes, just a quick little heads together.